The distress signal did not sound like a call for help. It sounded like fear given a voice and thrown into the dark. Across a silent stretch of space where no trade lanes existed and no patrols bothered to pass, a single transmission burst free. It was raw, unfiltered, and desperate. Not a military code. Not a formal request. Just a voice shaking with the knowledge that death was close and mercy was far away. For the Keeler Union vessel Bright Accord, that signal was the last thing standing between survival and extinction. The Keeler were not warriors. Their species evolved on wide plains under calm stars, where conflict was solved with words and patience. Their ships reflected that nature: smooth hulls, minimal armor, engines built for efficiency, not speed. The Bright Accord carried scientists, diplomats, and families relocating to a new colony world. Over 3,000 lives drifted quietly through space, believing themselves safe. They were wrong. The attack came without warning. Space folded, and from the distortion emerged ships that looked like knives made of metal and bone. The Vraxian marauders. Raiders from beyond recognized borders. A species that believed strength was proof of right, and survival was something you took, not something you shared. Plasma tore through the Bright Accord shields in seconds. The first hit killed power to half the ship. The second shattered an engine ring. Gravity failed. People screamed as they were thrown against walls or into the air. Emergency lights flickered red, painting the corridors like veins. On the command deck, Envoy Talaris stood frozen, claws gripping the console as reports flooded in. Shields at 12%. Engine 3 destroyed. Multiple hull breaches in civilian sectors. Talaris had trained for negotiations, for tense talks and political deadlocks. Nothing in their long career prepared them for the knowledge that every decision now meant life or death for thousands. "They are hailing us," a communications officer said, voice unsteady. The Vraxian message was brief and cruel. "Surrender your ship. Power down all systems. Resistance will result in full harvest." Harvest. The word made Talaris's blood run cold. Everyone knew what the Vraxians did to captured species. Slavery if you were lucky. Biological processing if you were not. How long until boarding? Talaris asked. "Less than 2 hours," came the reply. "They are disabling us slowly. They want us intact." Around the command deck, fear spread like a living thing. Some crew members prayed in quiet whispers. Others stared at their stations, hands shaking, refusing to look at the tactical display where 6 enemy ships circled them like predators. "Are any signals getting out?" Talaris asked. The answer came after a pause that felt far too long. "Most frequencies are jammed. But there is one." The officer hesitated. "It's an old channel. Pre-council era. Marked as emergency only. Marked with warnings." Talaris knew the channel. Every civilized species did. It was spoken of rarely and used even less. Not because it was forbidden by law, but because of who listened on the other end. Humans. Earthborn. Deathworld survivors. A species that rose from storms, predators, and endless internal wars to reach the stars carrying both miracles and weapons. They helped when they chose to help. And when they fought completely. Galactic records described them as unpredictable, dangerous, effective. Most importantly, the records all agreed on one thing. If humans answered your call, everything changed. "Open the channel," Talaris said. The officer's eyes widened. "Envoy, once we do this, there is no turning back." "I am aware," Talaris replied quietly. "But I will not let my people be taken apart piece by piece while I wait politely for death." The ship shuddered as another impact rocked the hull. Somewhere deep inside, a pressure door failed. The screams cut off suddenly. That decided it. The signal was sent. It carried no threats. No demands. Just truth. "This is the Keeler Union vessel Bright Accord. We are under attack by Vraxian marauders. Our ship is disabled. We carry civilians, including children. We cannot escape. We ask for help. From anyone who still believes mercy exists." The transmission vanished into the void. 17 light-years away, in a region of space most maps labeled as low activity, the signal arrived. On the human heavy cruiser UEF Resolute, alarms chimed softly as the message auto-decoded. The bridge crew barely noticed at first. It was another quiet patrol. Another uneventful shift. Captain Mara Ionescu was in the middle of reviewing maintenance reports when her tactical officer froze. "Captain," he said slowly, "we just received something unusual." Mara looked up. "Unusual how?" "Emergency frequency. Old channel. Non-human origin." The bridge went silent. That frequency was not noise. It was history. It was a promise humanity had made long ago, after learning how cruel the galaxy could be. "When all else fails, you may call us." "Put it through," Mara said. The alien voice echoed across the bridge. Fear. Dignity. Hope barely holding together. When it ended, no one spoke for several seconds. "How far?" Mara asked. 17 light-years, navigation replied. "We can make it in 6 hours if we push the drive hard." "And the enemy?" "Vraxian marauders. 6 ships. Heavily armed." Mara leaned back in her chair, eyes thoughtful. She had fought Vraxians before. They were brutal, confident, and completely unprepared for humans who refused to play by expected rules. She opened a fleet-wide channel. "All hands, this is Captain Ionescu," she said calmly. "We have received a civilian distress call. Thousands of lives. No defenses. Predators closing in." She paused. "I'm not ordering anyone to follow me. But I am responding. Anyone who believes that answering a cry for help still matters, prepare for immediate jump." One by one, confirmations lit up her display. Frigates. Destroyers. Support ships. Humanity's deadliest fleet was not the largest. It was the one that showed up when no one else would. "Jump to FTL," Mara ordered. "Maximum burn." Space twisted. And somewhere, surrounded by enemies and fading hope, the brighter cord waited, unaware that the signal they were never meant to use had been heard loud and clear. The brighter cord was dying slowly, like a candle trapped inside a jar. In the civilian decks, oxygen thinned in some corridors and surged dangerously in others. Emergency bulkheads sealed off fires and hull breaches, but every closure trapped people on the wrong side. Families huddled in dim light, breathing recycled air and listening to the distant thumps of impacts. The ship's soothing announcement system had failed, so only silence remained, broken by sobs, prayers, and the occasional scream when another section lost pressure. On the command deck, Envoy Talaris watched the tactical display with a numb kind of focus. 6 Vraxian ships maintained their hunting circle. They did not rush. They did not waste ammunition. They picked the brighter cord apart with steady precision, like a predator saving energy because it knew the prey had nowhere to run. "Boarding pods in preparation," the sensors officer reported. "They are aligning." "How long?" Talaris asked. 40 minutes. Talaris's throat tightened. 40 minutes was nothing. Not enough for rescue. Not enough for miracles. Not enough for anything except fear. Any response to the signal? Talaris asked, though they already knew the answer. The communications officer shook their head. "No. Jamming field still active. We cannot receive anything beyond local space." Talaris swallowed. They had sent a call into darkness. A plea. A gamble. Now they had to live long enough to see if the gamble meant salvation or simply a different kind of end. A young crew member stepped forward, voice trembling. "Envoy, what if the humans don't come?" Talaris looked at the faces around them. Crew, officers, people who had trusted diplomacy to keep them safe. Talaris chose honesty, because lies were a luxury no one could afford anymore. "Then we hold as long as we can," Talaris said. "And we make every minute cost the Vraxians something." The crew member nodded, not comforted, but steadied. Sometimes courage was not hope. Sometimes it was simply refusing to give the enemy easy victory. The Vraxian leader hailed again. Their voice came through like metal scraping stone. You called someone. We felt the pulse. It changes nothing. Surrender. Talaris activated the channel, forcing calm into their tone. There are children on this ship. There was a pause. Then the Vraxian replied, amused. Then surrender quickly. Their fear is unpleasant. The channel cut. Talaris's hands curled into fists. They had spent their life believing words could stop violence. Now words were only air thrown at monsters. 39 minutes. 17 light-years away, the UEF Resolute ripped through folded space with engines screaming at limits most species never dared touch. Inside the ship, the crew moved with quiet urgency. Not panicked. Not emotional. Focused. Human ships were built like tools, ugly, functional, and stubborn. Every corridor was narrow. Every door was heavy. Every system had redundant backups that would make most aliens call it wasteful. Humans called it survival. Captain Mara Ionescu stood at the tactical table while the ship trembled around her. A hologram projected the rescue zone, the broken civilian ship at the center, surrounded by 6 red enemy icons. Commander Ajay Rotti, her executive officer, studied the data. They're in a siege formation. Meaning? Mara asked. They expect us to stop at range, Ajay said. They expect us to threaten, negotiate, maybe trade. Their formation is designed to punish hesitation. Mara's lips tightened. Then we don't hesitate. A younger officer spoke cautiously. Captain, if we rush in, we'll be in crossfire from 3 ships at minimum. Mara nodded as if the danger was already counted and accepted. Correct. The officer blinked. So, what's the plan? Mara's eyes lifted to the crew around her. We do what humans always do when the odds are bad. Ajay gave a small smile. We cheat. Mara tapped the hologram, selecting the Vraxian ships. Vraxians are predators. Predators believe fear is a resource. They think prey will act predictably. They believe our choices are limited. She looked up. We will show them something they can't process. We only have a small fleet in range, Ajay warned. Small is fine, Mara said. We're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to break a siege. She keyed a channel to the ships that had answered her call, 8 vessels total, scattered patrol units that had turned hard toward the signal the moment it arrived. This is Captain Ionescu, she said. Listen carefully. We're not engaging in a standard battle. Objective is civilian extraction. Priority is speed, confusion, and control. The crew aboard every ship listened. Some were veterans. Some were young. But all of them understood what that old frequency meant. It meant someone had run out of options. It meant someone had been forced into the darkest corner and decided to call the thing the galaxy feared. Mara continued. We hit fast. We hit close. We hit in a way they've never seen. She glanced at her weapons officer. Load the disruptors. The weapons officer hesitated. Captain, those aren't council approved. Mara's gaze stayed level. Neither is harvesting civilians. Understood, the officer said, and issued the orders. Human weapons systems hummed as they woke. Not elegant beams. Not ceremonial cannons. Practical things, built by a species that learned long ago that survival belonged to those who prepared for the worst. In engineering, the chief reactor specialist muttered a curse as warning lights flared. You're pushing the core too hard, she told the engine tech beside her. This isn't a sprint. It's a controlled explosion. The tech grinned nervously. You say that like it's a bad thing. She didn't smile back. It is. But her hands never stopped working. She didn't slow the engines. She reinforced coolant flows. She rerouted power around failing circuits. If the reactor wanted to scream, she would teach it how to scream longer. Because the cry for help hadn't come from a soldier. It had come from families. Back on the brighter chord, the first boarding pods launched. They appeared on the tactical display like small darts fired from the Vraxian ships. Fast. Silent. Dozens of them streaked toward the civilian hull. Impact in 3 minutes, the sensors officer said. Talaris felt their chest tighten so sharply it hurt. Seal inner corridors. Evacuate civilians away from hull contact points. The ship's damaged systems responded slowly, but they responded. Doors slammed shut. Warning lights flashed. People ran. A mother on the civilian deck grabbed her child and pressed them behind a storage crate. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, eyes wet with terror. Elsewhere, Keeler security teams armed themselves with tools that were never meant for war: plasma cutters, shock batons, emergency flare guns. They looked like weak insects standing between a storm and the helpless. "Envoy," the communications officer said suddenly, voice sharp with disbelief. "I'm picking up something." Talaris turned. "What?" "It's faint. But it's there. A pulse outside the jamming band." The officer's hands trembled as they refined the signal. A single phrase, translated into Keeler speech with strange, blunt clarity. "Hold on." Then another pulse. 6 minutes. Talaris's breath caught. Not because the message was poetic. Not because it promised safety. But because it was simple. Certain. Like the voice of someone who had already decided the outcome. 6 minutes was still too long. Boarding pods hit the hull with brutal force. The ship shook. Metal screamed. The deck lights flickered. Somewhere, cutting torches began to burn. The UEF Resolute dropped out of folded space like a thrown spear. Stars snapped back into place. The rescue zone appeared. And every human on the bridge saw it at the same time. A broken civilian ship surrounded by predators. Mara didn't waste a single second. "All ships," she said, voice like steel. "Execute Phase 1. Now." Human vessels surged forward, not spreading out, not forming a neat line. They clustered tightly, engines flaring, like wolves running shoulder to shoulder through a storm. The Vraxians noticed instantly. Their ships turned, weapons powering up. Their formation tightened, confident. This was the moment they expected. Mara smiled slightly, but it wasn't a warm expression. "Deploy the mirrors," she ordered. From hidden bays, small devices launched, dozens of them. They looked like harmless drifting debris. But they weren't. They were sensor ghosts. Each one flashed the signature of a human ship, then split that signature into multiple echoes. The space around the Vraxians bloomed with false targets, phantom fleets, impossible angles. The Vraxian gunners hesitated. Predators could be brave, but confusion was not in their nature. Confusion meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant losing control. Their weapons fired anyway, and half their shots tore through empty space. "Phase 2, Mara said calmly. The human ships didn't slow. They accelerated straight into the siege ring. The Vraxians had expected a distant fight. They were about to learn what humans did best when distance disappeared and time ran out. On the brighter chord, Talaris watched the tactical display as blue icons slammed into the red circle. The siege shattered like glass. Talaris whispered, barely able to believe it. They came. And in the cold black between stars, humanity answered the distress call the galaxy feared, without permission, without hesitation, and without mercy for those who preyed on the helpless. The first human volley did not aim to destroy. That alone confused the Vraxians. Instead of focusing fire on hulls or engines, the human ships unleashed wide-spectrum disruption bursts. Invisible waves rolled through space, slamming into the Vraxian fleet like a sudden pressure change. Shields flickered. Targeting systems stuttered. Internal sensors screamed conflicting data. "What is happening?" a Vraxian weapons commander hissed. Their screens showed chaos. One moment there were 8 human ships. The next, 20. Then none. Then dozens, overlapping and impossible. Sensor mirrors and signal ghosts turned the battlefield into a lie. Predators relied on clear sight. On knowing where prey ran. Humans took that away. "Boarding pods are still active," Commander Ajay Rotti reported. 2 have breached the civilian ship. Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we don't have time." She didn't say for caution. She said, "Initiate close burn." The bridge crew stiffened. Close burn meant pushing engines beyond safety margins while maneuvering at knife-range distances. It meant risk. It meant trusting human engineering and human reflexes more than probability. The Resolute surged forward, skimming past a Vraxian cruiser so closely that debris scraped its armored hull. Human point defense cannons roared, not at the cruiser, but at space around the civilian ship. Boarding pods exploded mid-flight. One pod made it through. Inside the brighter cord, the breach finally gave way. Metal screamed as the hull tore open. Atmosphere vented violently, ripping loose objects into space. Emergency fields snapped into place seconds too late. The corridor filled with smoke and drifting debris. Then the Vraxians came through. They were tall, armored, and confident. Bladed limbs unfolded as they entered, moving with brutal efficiency. Their armor was grown, not built, living plates fused to muscle and bone. Keeler security forces fired. Their weapons barely scratched the invaders. A Vraxian struck one guard aside, sending them crashing into the wall with a sickening crack. Another raised its weapon. And the deck shook again. Not from impact. From thunder. A human drop pod slammed into the outer hull of the brighter cord, cutting straight through damaged plating like a nail through thin wood. The pod's doors blew outward in a cloud of steam and sparks. 4 humans stepped out. They were smaller than the Vraxians. Softer looking. No claws. No natural armor. But they moved with terrifying certainty. Their weapons were compact, ugly, and unmistakably designed for killing at close range. The Vraxians turned, surprised. That was their mistake. Human firearms barked, sharp and controlled. Not wild. Not frantic. Every shot aimed for joints, sensors, weak points learned through bitter experience. A Vraxian staggered as its leg gave out. Another roared as its visor shattered. The corridor filled with sound and smoke and motion. The humans advanced without shouting. Without hesitation. One of them spoke into a wrist-mounted device. Contact made. Boarding threat contained. On the bridge, Envoy Talares stared at the internal feed, stunned. "They're not afraid," a crew member whispered. "No," Talares said softly. "They are focused." Outside, the battle escalated. The Vraxian fleet finally regrouped enough to fire effectively. A heavy plasma beam struck a human frigate, shearing away part of its hull. The ship spun, alarms blaring. "Damage report." Mara snapped. "Structural breach," came the reply. "We're still in it." "Good," Mara said. "Pull them closer." Ajay raised an eyebrow. "Closer." Mara nodded. "They think strength comes from distance and dominance. Let's teach them what happens when humans decide the fight is personal." Human ships altered course, not retreating, not scattering, but tightening their formation around the civilian vessel like a shield made of moving steel. The Vraxians hesitated again. They had never seen this behavior. Most species protected themselves first. Humans placed themselves in the line of fire. On the brighter cord, fires burned in several decks, but the boarding threat was collapsing. Human Marines moved through the corridors with disciplined speed, clearing sections and escorting civilians towards safer areas. A Keeler child stared wide-eyed at one of them. "You came," the child said, voice trembling. The human paused for half a second. "Yeah," she replied. "We did." She guided the child forward, never slowing. In the engine room of the Resolute, warning lights turned from yellow to red. "We're past safe limits," the chief engineer said. "Cooling systems are degrading." "How long?" Mara asked. "Enough," came the answer. "But not forever." Mara nodded. "We don't need forever." She studied the tactical display. The Vraxians were adapting, but too slowly. Their formation was breaking. Their coordination fraying. Predators were dangerous when confident. They were clumsy when afraid. "Open a channel to the Vraxian flagship," Mara ordered. The bridge crew hesitated only a moment before complying. The Vraxian leader appeared on the screen, mandibles twitching in rage. You interfere in matters that do not concern you, it snarled. Mara leaned forward slightly. You attacked civilians. They are weak, the Vraxian replied. Weakness invites harvest. Mara's voice stayed calm. You picked the wrong weakness. She cut the channel. Target their command ship, she said. But don't destroy it. Ajay understood instantly. You want them to see. Exactly. Human weapons shifted. Not maximum yield. Precise strikes. Systems went dark across the Vraxian flagship. Engines died. Weapons fell silent. The ship drifted, helpless but intact. Every other Vraxian ship noticed. Their leader was alive. And powerless. This is your only warning, Mara broadcast on all frequencies. Withdraw. Leave this system. Never target civilian vessels again. There was a long pause. The Vraxians had never been offered mercy after losing dominance. Finally, one by one, their ships turned away. Not because they believed in peace, but because they had learned something new. Some prey did not run. Some prey answered back. On the brighter chord, Envoy Talares felt their legs finally give way. Relief hit like a wave, shaking, overwhelming, real. They whispered words that no translator was needed for. Thank you. But the humans weren't done yet. Because saving lives was only part of what they did. The next step was making sure no one ever had to send that signal again. The battlefield grew quiet in a way that felt unreal. Vraxian ships vanished into folded space one by one, fleeing without ceremony. No victory cries echoed across human channels. No celebration followed. Humans did not cheer when predators retreated. They watched. They verified. They waited until danger was truly gone. Only then did Captain Mara Ionescu release the breath she had been holding. Secure the perimeter, she ordered. Scan for hidden mines, delayed weapons, or shadow trackers. I don't want surprises. Aye, Captain. On the brighter chord, the silence felt heavier than the explosions had. Fires still burned in distant sections. The ship systems were wounded but alive. Civilians slowly emerged from hiding, blinking in confusion, clutching one another as if the universe might suddenly change its mind. Envoy Talares stood on the bridge, hands trembling now that fear no longer held them upright. They left, a crew member said softly. They really left. Yes, Talares replied. Because someone stood between us and them. A human officer appeared on the bridge's main screen. Her face was streaked with soot and sweat, eyes sharp but calm. This is Lieutenant Reyes of the United Earth Fleet, she said. Boarding threats neutralized. We're beginning damage assessment and civilian evacuation. You're safe now. The words felt impossible. Safe. Talares bowed deeply, a gesture of their people's highest respect. We do not know how to repay you. Reyes shook her head slightly. You already did. You asked for help. Human engineering teams moved fast. Docking clamps locked onto the brighter chord with practiced precision. Emergency umbilicals transferred power and atmosphere. Medics crossed between ships, carrying supplies and calm voices. They did not rush. They did not treat the Keeler like burdens. They treated them like people. A Keeler elder watched as a human medic gently wrapped a thermal blanket around a shivering child. You risked yourselves, the elder said quietly. For strangers. The medic smiled faintly. We get that a lot. In the engine room of the Resolute, the situation was less peaceful. The reactor screamed. Chief Engineer Lena Ward stood with arms braced against a console as warning alarms layered over one another. Sweat soaked her uniform. We're overheating, a technician shouted. Containment integrity dropping. Lena didn't look away from the readouts. I know. You pushed the core beyond design limits, another voice said. If we don't power down. We don't, Lena snapped. Not yet. She tapped her communicator. Bridge, this is engineering. We've got damage. Serious damage. Mara's voice came back immediately. Can you hold? Lena glanced around the room. At her team. At the machinery that had carried them through fire and fear. For a little while, she said. But it's going to cost us. Mara understood. Do what you need to do. People come first. The channel closed. Lena exhaled, then made the call no engineer liked to make. Dump auxiliary systems, she ordered. Non-essential decks lose power. Life support stays stable. Everything else, gone. Lights died across sections of the ship. Comfort systems shut down. Gravity fluctuated. The Resolute would limp for weeks after this. No one complained. In the evacuation bays, human Marines stood watch while civilians boarded transport craft. Their armor bore scorch marks and fresh dents. Some leaned on walls, exhausted, adrenaline fading. A Keeler child tugged on one Marine's sleeve. Are you monsters? The child asked quietly. The Marine blinked, then knelt to meet the child's eyes. Who told you that? Stories, the child said. The Marine considered this. We can be scary, he admitted. But only to things that hurt people who can't fight back. The child nodded slowly, as if filing this away as an important truth. Envoy Talaris watched from a distance, emotion tightening their chest. They had spent decades believing the galaxy could be reasoned into peace. Now they understood something deeper. Peace existed because someone was willing to stand in front of it and bleed. Captain Mara met Talaris aboard the Bright Accord once the situation stabilized. The human captain was older than Talaris expected. Lines marked her face, not from age alone, but from responsibility. Her eyes carried weight. You made the right call, Mara said after introductions. Not an easy one. Talaris nodded. Our people teach that asking for help is weakness. Mara shook her head. It's honesty. Weakness is pretending you don't need it. They walked past damaged bulkheads and scorched corridors. You could have destroyed them, Talaris said. The Vraxians. We could have, Mara agreed. But fear teaches faster than death. Now they'll remember. And if they don't? Mara's expression hardened just a little. Then we remind them again. Talaris understood then why the galaxy feared humans. Not because they loved violence, but because they were willing to carry it so others didn't have to. Hours later, the last civilian transport departed. The Bright Accord drifted under human escort, wounded but alive. On the Resolute, systems stabilized just enough to breathe. Lena Ward finally allowed herself to sit down. Her hands shook now. The cost had been high, burned circuits, cracked conduits, months of repairs. She didn't regret it. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Ships scarred. Crews exhausted. But thousands of lives saved. Mara stood alone on the bridge, watching the stars settle into normal patterns. Ajay approached quietly. Council channels are lighting up. They're concerned. Mara smiled without humor. They always are. They'll say you escalated. That you acted without authorization. Mara nodded. I did. Ajay hesitated. Worth it. Mara looked at the data feed showing safe civilian transports moving away from danger. Yes, she said. Every time. Because somewhere out there, someone would remember tonight. Someone would remember that when the galaxy turned away, humanity didn't. And that memory would travel farther than fear ever could. But the story wasn't over yet. Because actions like these never stayed quiet for long. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans made mercy a reputation. The galaxy did not forget. It tried to at first. It always did. Official reports described the incident in careful language. A localized conflict. A human intervention. A miscalculated Vraxian expansion. Words designed to smooth rough truths and bury uncomfortable lessons. But stories do not listen to reports. Stories listen to survivors. On the Keeler homeworld, Envoy Talaris stood before the Union Assembly weeks later, scars still visible along their arms where emergency restraints had burned skin during decompression. "We are alive," Talaris said simply. "Because humans came." The chamber was silent. "They were not gentle," Talaris continued. "They were not polite. They did not ask permission from councils or treaties while our children waited to be harvested." Talaris lifted their gaze. "They acted." That speech spread faster than any official statement. Across trade stations and deep space relays, beings whispered about the day predators ran. About human ships that flew into crossfire without hesitation. About soldiers who fought like engineers and engineers who fought like warriors. And most of all, about the signal. The old frequency. The one no one was meant to use. Because now, it was no longer a myth. On the edge of human-controlled space, Captain Mara Ionescu stood before a tribunal of her own people. Admirals and analysts watched from elevated seats. Data projections floated in the air, displaying casualty risks, unauthorized actions, reactor damage, and diplomatic consequences. "You violated council protocols," one official said. "Yes," Mara replied. "You endangered human assets." "Yes." "You could have triggered a wider conflict." "Yes." The room waited. Mara did not apologize. Instead, she said, "But 3,000 civilians are alive." Silence followed. Then another voice spoke, quieter. "Would you do it again?" Mara met their eyes. Without hesitation. No one argued. Because deep down, every human in that room knew the truth. Civilization was not built by those who waited safely behind rules. It was built by those who decided some lines were worth crossing. Far from politics and speeches, the UEF Resolute drifted in a repair dock, hull blackened, engines gutted, systems torn open and rebuilt piece by piece. Chief Engineer Lena Ward floated beneath an exposed reactor housing, inspecting damage with tired eyes. A junior tech hovered nearby. "Was it worth it?" he asked softly. Lena tightened a bolt and nodded. "We'll fix the ship." "I meant, the risk." She paused, then smiled faintly. "Ships are metal. People aren't." The tech didn't ask again. The Vraxians remembered too. Not as a lesson in mercy, but as a lesson in fear. Their raiding patterns changed. Civilian targets vanished from their routes. When human patrol signatures appeared on long-range sensors, Vraxian fleets turned away without engagement. Predators learned quickly when pain was precise and unavoidable. They learned that humans did not hunt. They guarded. Years passed. The galaxy shifted. New treaties formed, not because councils agreed, but because no one wanted to be on the wrong side of a species that answered desperation with overwhelming resolve. And slowly, quietly, something changed. When a mining colony lost power beyond mapped space, the distress signal hesitated, then activated. When a research vessel vanished near a gravity storm, someone whispered, "Use the human channel." Not because humans were worshipped, but because humans responded. Every time. On a small human outpost, long after the battle had faded into history, a young communications officer stared at her console as an unfamiliar signal pulsed into existence. Old frequency. Emergency priority. Civilian origin. Her heart quickened. "Captain," she called out. "We've got a distress call." The captain didn't ask questions. She only said, "Route it." A frightened alien voice filled the room. Different species. Different stars. Same fear. When the message ended, the officer swallowed. "They are far," she said. "Dangerous territory." The captain stood. "Plot the course." Outside the viewport, human ships began to power up. Engines hummed. Crews moved. Systems awakened. Not because they were ordered. Because someone had asked. And somewhere in the dark, a truth had taken root and refused to die. When the galaxy turned its back. When hope failed. When monsters closed in. Humanity answered. And the void remembered the sound of it.